One accidental airdrop. That's all it took to shatter Carly Erickson's carefully engineered life. She meant to send a sassy, high-angle selfie to her brother, but instead, it landed in the hands of the apex, Dominic Thorne Vane, a billionaire with molten amber eyes and a secret that defies the laws of physics. When he whispered, "Nice angle," he wasn't just looking at a photo, he was claiming a mate. Now, Carly is trading blueprints for a world of predators, ancient bonds, and a family dinner that might just end in a lunar transformation. Welcome to Atlena's Romantasy Collection. Whether you're a longtime member of the pack or just wandering into our forest for the first time, we are thrilled to have you here for this journey of romance and supernatural intrigue. Don't let the story end here. Subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story upload. Like and share this video to help our pack grow. Drop a comment below. We want to know where in the world you are listening from tonight. Chapter 1. The Italian Leather Massacre. The morning of the Aegis Global Innovation Summit did not begin with a vision of corporate elegance. It began with the sound of high-density foam being shredded in a rhythmic, joyful fashion. Tess Callahan stood in her walk-in closet, staring at the empty space where her limited-edition emerald stilettos had been sitting 5 minutes ago. Her gaze slowly traveled to the rug, where Jack the Ripper, a 60-pound pit bull with a head like a cinder block, was currently meticulously disassembling the left heel. He looked up, his tail thumping against the floor in a steady, unrepentant beat, a stray piece of green leather stuck to his nose. "Jack, you absolute menace! Those were for the gala!" Tess shrieked, though there was more exasperation than genuine anger in her voice. She had designed earthquake-resistant skyscrapers that were less stubborn than this dog. "Is the Ripper at it again?" Leo Callahan poked his head into the room, his eyes glued to his smartphone. At 23, Tess's younger brother was a digital savant who lived in oversized hoodies and a perpetual state of irony. "I told you, Tess, he doesn't like the color emerald. It triggers his aesthetic sensibilities." "He doesn't have aesthetic sensibilities, Leo. He has a hunger for artisanal craftsmanship," Tess snapped, grabbing a stray sneaker to toss at her brother's head. He ducked with practiced ease. Downstairs, the front door slammed, followed by the booming voice of Arthur Callahan. "Tess, did you see the morning news? Primal Infrastructure is underreporting their quarterly logistics earnings. Something smells like a conspiracy, and I'm betting it's the CEO, that Thorne Vane fellow." Tess groaned, checking her watch. She was already 30 minutes behind schedule. "Dad, not everyone is a secret villain. Sometimes a logistics company is just a logistics company." "Naive," Arthur shouted back from the kitchen. "The man has too much hair gel and too many private satellites. It's unnatural. Tess, darling, focus!" Beatrice Callahan's voice drifted up the stairs next. "I've sent a bouquet of white lilies to your office to calm your chakras. You cannot go to the summit looking like a gargoyle. You need to network. You need a man who doesn't eat your shoes." Tess looked at Jack, who was now wagging his entire back half, looking incredibly proud of the green confetti he had created. This was her life, a whirlwind of overbearing family members, a dog with a taste for luxury, and a career she had built from the ground up through sheer, stubborn brilliance. She was the CEO of Callahan Constructs, a woman who preferred blueprints to boyfriends and steel beams to small talk. "I don't need a man, Mom," Tess yelled back, stepping over the ruins of her shoes. "I need a pair of heels that are rip-proof and a brother who actually works for a living." "I'm working right now," Leo defended, finally looking up from his phone. "I just bypassed the Aegis security firewall. You know their guest list is encrypted? Super shady. Also, you're on the VIP list for the balcony level. High-angle territory. Very exclusive." Tess sighed, grabbing a backup pair of black pumps. She didn't care about the VIP list or the high-angle territory. She just wanted to get through the night without her father being arrested for trespassing or her mother trying to set her up with a venture capitalist. She caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. Her dark hair was pulled into a sleek, severe bun, her makeup was flawless, and her black silk dress fit like a second skin. She looked every bit the powerhouse architect the industry feared. "Okay, Jack," she whispered, leaning down to give the dog a quick scratch behind his ears. Try not to eat the sofa while I'm out. If I'm lucky, I'll be back by midnight with a pocket full of boring business cards and a headache. She had no idea that within 3 hours, her digital footprint would collide with the most powerful predator in the city, changing the structural integrity of her life forever. Chapter 2. The Accidental Transmission. The Vertex Tower was a shimmering needle of glass and ego, piercing the city skyline. Inside, the Aegis Summit was in full swing. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, desperation, and high-end catering. Tess Callahan moved through the crowd like a shark in a tank of goldfish, her sharp wit acting as a deterrent to anyone who tried to engage her in mindless chatter. "Tess, over here!" Sloane Callahan, Tess's older sister, waved her over from a cluster of lawyers. Sloane looked like she was ready to sue the entire room for general incompetence. "Tell these people why their proposed zoning laws are a structural nightmare." Tess spent 20 minutes dismantling a junior partner's argument with the precision of a demolition crew. By the time she was finished, the man looked like he wanted to hide in the buffet. "God, I hate these things," Tess muttered, slipping away toward the balcony. "You're just grumpy because you haven't insulted enough people yet," Sloane laughed, sipping her champagne. "Go take a breather. I have to go stop Dad from interviewing the catering staff about their union rights." Tess escaped to the balcony, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling heat of the ballroom. Below her, the city was a grid of lights, a puzzle she had spent her life trying to solve through architecture. She felt a wave of loneliness, the kind that only hits when you're surrounded by thousands of people who don't actually know you. She pulled out her phone and checked her messages. "Leo, Dad found the security room. He's currently explaining journalistic integrity to a confused guard. Send help." "Mom, I see a very handsome man in a navy suit near the bar. He has a chin like a Greek god. Go stand near him." Tess rolled her eyes. She felt petty, frustrated, and remarkably extra. She decided to send a photo to Leo to show him exactly how much fun she was not having. She leaned against the railing, pouting her lips in a mock sultry expression, and snapped a high-angle selfie. The lighting was perfect. Her cheekbones looked sharp enough to draw blood, and her eyes were full of defiant fire. She typed a caption, "Surrounded by vultures and Greek godchins, but at least my highlight is popping. Tell Jack to save a spot on the bed for me. This party is a structural failure." She hit the airdrop icon. Her thumb hovered over the contact list. Usually, Leo's phone popped up as the troll, but tonight, the list was crowded with the Bluetooth signals of hundreds of high-end devices. Just as a waiter passed by, bumping her elbow, her thumb descended. Sent to the Apex. Tessa's heart did a slow, sickening somersault. "Wait, no," she whispered, frantically tapping the screen. But the blue bar had already finished its journey. The notification popped up with agonizing clarity. Delivered. "Who the hell is the Apex?" she hissed, her face heating up. She scanned the balcony, expecting to see some teenage tech scion laughing at her. Instead, she felt a sudden, heavy shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling. A sudden drop in pressure, like the air before a thunderstorm. The hair on her arms stood up. A shadow elongated across the glass floor, tall and broad, looming over her like a mountain. She didn't turn around immediately. She couldn't. Her body felt strangely heavy, her pulse drumming a frantic rhythm in her ears that sounded less like fear and more like a summons. The scent of cedarwood, cold rain, and something primal and metallic filled her lungs. A low, vibrating hum, a notification sound, came from directly behind her. Tess closed her eyes for a split second, praying for the ground to swallow her. She slowly turned, her feisty mask slipping into place, ready to berate whoever was hovering. She looked up, and up. Standing there was a man who looked less like a CEO and more like a king from a forgotten age. His suit was dark charcoal, tailored so perfectly it looked like armor. His hair was black as a raven's wing, and his face was a masterpiece of harsh, masculine lines. But it was his eyes that froze her. They were a deep, piercing amber, currently fixed on the screen of his phone. The screen that showed Tessa's sarcastic, high-angle selfie. Chapter 3. The Scent of Lightning. Dominic Thornvane had been having a remarkably boring evening until the air in the room suddenly changed. For an Alpha King, the world was usually a dull, gray blur of controlled scents and predictable heartbeats. But then, a bolt of lightning had struck the center of his chest. It was a scent, mint, crushed velvet, and a spark of something so fierce it made his wolf claw at the surface of his skin. Mate. The word echoed in his mind with the force of a command. He had been mid-sentence with a senator, but he had simply stopped talking and walked away, his internal compass spinning until it pointed directly toward the balcony. Then his phone vibrated. He looked down to see a photo of a woman with defiant eyes and a sarcastic pout. The caption mentioned vultures and highlight. It was the most ridiculous thing he had ever seen, and he wanted to frame it. He stepped onto the balcony, his eyes finding her instantly. She was smaller than he expected, but her presence was massive. She radiated a "don't touch me" energy that made his inner wolf want to lean in closer. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the fire in her soul that called to him, a match for his own. He saw her turn. He saw the flash of embarrassment, followed quickly by a sharp, defensive glare. "You sent me a picture," Dominic said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. Tess Callahan didn't cower. She didn't giggle. She squared her shoulders, her chin tilted up at an angle that screamed defiance. "It was an accident. My thumb slipped. Give me that." She reached for his phone, her fingers grazing his hand. The contact was electric. A physical jolt of heat raced up Dominic's arm, searing into his heart. He saw her eyes widen, her pupils dilating as she felt it too. The bond, the tether, the impossible magnetic pull. Dominic didn't let go of the phone, but he didn't pull away either. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. He could smell the faint scent of the soap she used, the adrenaline in her system, and the underlying sweetness that was uniquely hers. "An accident," he repeated, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. He felt a surge of possessive protectiveness so strong it nearly made his eyes shift to gold right there in the moonlight. He had to exert every ounce of his legendary patience to keep his voice calm. "Is that so? Because it seems like a very deliberate choice of lighting." He leaned even closer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he whispered the words that would haunt her for the rest of the week. "Nice angle, though I think I prefer the view from over here." He felt her breath hitch. He felt the flutter of her pulse against his thumb where he still held her hand. He wanted to scoop her up and carry her away from this glass cage, to find a place where he could mark her as his and never let her go. But he knew this woman. He had read her vibe in an instant. She was a fortress. If he pushed too hard, she would double the thickness of her walls. He straightened up, giving her a slow, devastating smirk. He tucked his phone into his pocket and handed her his matte black business card. It was heavier than it looked, embedded with a microchip that only her firm's scanners would be able to read. "Tessa Callahan," he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his tongue. "I think you'll find my vulture tendencies are quite different from the rest of the men in this room. I expect to hear from you. My infrastructure needs a new perspective." He walked away before she could respond, his heart hammering a rhythm of victory. He didn't need to look back to know she was staring at him, her face a mix of fury and confusion. The hunt had begun, but for the first time in his life, Dominic didn't want to capture the prey. He wanted to be conquered by it. Chapter 4. The Morning After the Storm. Tess didn't sleep. She spent the entire night paced her living room, her mind replaying the 5-minute encounter on the balcony like a broken film strip. The way he had looked at her, as if he could see every secret she had ever kept. The way his voice had felt like a physical touch. "He's a creep, Jack," she told the dog, who was currently busy trying to unstuff a plush toy. "A billionaire, overgroomed, arrogant creep who probably thinks he's in a movie." Jack the Ripper let out a low woof and shook the toy violently, sending a cloud of white fluff into the air. "Exactly! Total destruction of my personal space," Tess agreed, throwing herself onto the sofa. She looked at the matte black card on the coffee table. It didn't have a phone number, it just had a logo, a stylized wolf's head formed from architectural lines, and the words, Primal Infrastructure. "Tess, are you awake?" Beatrice Callahan burst into the apartment without knocking, carrying a tray of organic muffins and a determined expression. "Sloane told me what happened. You talked to Dominic Thorne Vane, on a balcony, in the moonlight." "We didn't talk, Mom. He whispered something weird and left," Tess grumbled, pulling a pillow over her face. "He didn't just whisper, Tess," Leo said, wandering in from the kitchen with a laptop under his arm. "I did some digging. Thorne Vane doesn't whisper to anyone. The guy is a ghost. No scandals, no public girlfriends, no social media. His company handles 80% of the world's high-security shipping. He's the most powerful man you've ever accidentally flashed." "I did not flash him. It was a selfie," Tess shouted into the pillow. "Whatever you call it, he's interested," Arthur Callahan said, appearing in the doorway with a magnifying glass and a file folder. "I've been looking into Primal Infrastructure's land acquisitions. They're buying up old quarries and forest land. Deep, isolated places. Very suspicious. He's probably building a subterranean lair for a world domination plot." "Dad, stop," Tess pleaded. "He's just a guy with too much money and a weird Bluetooth name." "The Apex," Leo mused. "That's his handle. It's a bit on the nose, don't you think? Like he's the top of the food chain?" Tess's phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject: Request for consultation, Project Ironwood, from Office of the CEO, Primal Infrastructure. Message: Ms. Callahan, your expertise in reinforced skeletal structures is required for a project of national security significance. A car will be at your residence at 9 a.m. Please bring the dog. Mr. Thornvane found your caption regarding the structural failure of the gala, and your dog's opinion of the bed space quite refreshing. Tess froze. How did he know about Jack? She looked at her brother. Leo looked at the floor. I might have mentioned the Ripper on a public forum once or twice while I was gaming, and his security team is, like, really good. Tess felt a surge of her signature sass returning. He wants a consultation? Fine, I'll give him a consultation. I'll show him exactly what happens when you try to buy a Callahan's time. She stood up, her eyes flashing. Mom, take the muffins. Leo, get off my Wi-Fi. Dad, keep the magnifying glass. I'm going to go tell a billionaire to get bent. Jack the Ripper let out a celebratory bark and shredded the last of the plush toy. Chapter 5. The Glass Fortress. The car that arrived at 9 a.m. was not a standard limousine. It was a matte black armored SUV with tinted windows that looked like they could withstand a rocket blast. Tess climbed in, dragging a very excited Jack the Ripper with her. She had decided to wear her most professional outfit, a sharp gray power suit and glasses, to signal that she was strictly there for business. The drive took them out of the city center and toward a massive industrial complex hidden behind a forest of towering pines. This was the headquarters of Primal Infrastructure. As they passed through the gates, Tess's architectural brain started humming. The security was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls weren't just concrete, they were reinforced with a composite material she didn't recognize, and the sensors were integrated into the landscaping with terrifying precision. Impressive, she muttered, despite herself. The SUV stopped in front of a building that looked like a monolith of obsidian and steel. A man was waiting for them at the entrance. He was tall, with the build of a linebacker and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Ms. Callahan, I'm Gideon, head of security, the man said, his voice clipped. He looked down at Jack the Ripper. The dog, who usually barked at everyone, suddenly went dead silent. He tucked his tail slightly and sniffed the air, his ears twitching. He's friendly, Tess said, narrowing her eyes at Gideon. Usually. He recognizes a higher frequency, Gideon said enigmatically. This way. They were led through a lobby that felt more like a cathedral of modern technology. Every employee they passed moved with a strange, fluid grace. There was no shouting, no frantic energy, just a silent, lethal efficiency. They reached a set of double doors that slid open soundlessly. Inside was an office that overlooked the entire complex. Dominic Thornvane was standing at a floor-to-ceiling window, his back to them. "You're late," he said, without turning around. "And you're arrogant," Tess retorted, crossing her arms. "I don't appreciate being summoned like a delivery pizza, Mr. Thornvane." Dominic turned. Today, he wasn't in a suit. He wore a black tactical shirt that strained against his shoulders and dark trousers. He looked less like a CEO and more like a predator in his natural habitat. His amber eyes locked onto hers, and that same magnetic pull from the gala slammed into her. "I didn't summon you for a pizza, Tessa. I summoned you because the world is changing, and I need a fortress that can't be broken by conventional means." He walked toward her, and to Tessa's utter shock, Jack the Ripper didn't growl. He didn't jump. He walked right up to Dominic and sat down, looking up at the man with something that looked suspiciously like respect. Dominic reached down and scratched the dog behind the ears. "Hello, Jack. I hear you have a taste for Italian leather." "Don't encourage him," Tess snapped, though her heart was racing. "Now, what is Project Ironwood, and why does it require my unique perspective?" Dominic stepped closer, invading her personal space once again. He smelled of cedar and something wild. "Project Ironwood is the future of my people, Tessa, and you are the only one with the imagination to build it. But first—" He leaned down, his voice dropping to that intoxicating whisper. "We need to discuss that selfie. I've had it enlarged. The lighting really is spectacular." Tess felt her face turn beet red. You did what? You're a freak! A total grade-A billionaire freak!" Dominic chuckled, a deep sound that vibrated in his chest. "Perhaps, but I'm a freak who pays very well. Shall we begin?" Chapter 6. The Blueprints of a Secret. Tess stared at the digital rendering projected in Dominic's office. It wasn't just a building, it was an architectural marvel of subterranean integration. Project Ironwood was designed to be a massive residential estate, but the specifications were insane. The load-bearing requirements for the floors were triple the industry standard, and the ventilation systems were designed for a volume of air exchange that suggested a stadium rather than a home. "You're building a fortress, Mr. Thornvane," Tess said, tracing the lines of the perimeter wall with a laser pointer. "But these internal courtyards, they're completely open to the sky. From a security standpoint, it's a glaring vulnerability. A drone could drop in before your security team even blinked." Dominic leaned against his desk, watching her with a terrifyingly focused intensity. "The sky is not the threat, Tessa, and the inhabitants of Ironwood don't appreciate being caged. They need space, natural light, air." "Space for what? A private army of giants?" Tess turned to face him, her hands on her hips. "The floor reinforcements alone suggest you're planning on moving heavy machinery through the living rooms. Or maybe you're just hoarding gold like a dragon." Dominic laughed, a rich sound that made the fine hairs on Tess's neck stand up. "Not gold, just a very large, very active family. We tend to be heavy-footed." "And the acoustic dampening?" Tess pushed, stepping into his personal space. "This entire wing is lined with specialized sound-absorbing alloy. What are you doing in there? Testing jet engines? Or do you just scream into the void when your stocks go down?" Dominic straightened, closing the gap between them until Tess had to tilt her head back. The scent of cedar and rain intensified, wrapping around her like a physical weight. "My people have very sensitive hearing, Tessa. In a world as loud as this one, we value silence. Can you build me a place where silence is guaranteed, but the soul can still breathe?" Tess felt her heart betray her, skipping a beat at the word soul. She looked away, focusing on Jack the Ripper, who was currently sprawled across a pristine white fur rug, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "I can build you anything," she said, her voice dropping its combative edge for a fleeting second. "But I don't work in the dark. If I'm going to reinforce this structure, I need to know the exact nature of the stress it's going to endure. Static loads? Dynamic? Seismic?" "Biological," Dominic whispered, his hand hovering just inches from her waist. "I need you to visit the site. I want you to feel the land before you pour the concrete. Tomorrow, 5 a.m. 5 a.m.? Are you joking? I have a life, Dominic. I have a family who currently thinks you're a Bond villain. My father is literally outside in my Porsche right now, probably trying to bug your flower beds. Dominic's eyes flashed that impossible amber gold. Arthur is currently being distracted by my head of catering with a very rare scotch and a story about a missing shipping container in 1994. He'll be fine for another hour. As for you, I'll pick you up. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty. Carly rolled her eyes, desperate to ignore the way her pulse jumped every time he got close. You're delusional. I'm an architect. I work with blueprints and sterile glass, not mud and morning dew. And just so we're clear, if you keep obsessing over that accidental airdrop, my invoice is going to reflect the emotional damages. Dominic leaned down, his lips ghosting near her ear, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that made her knees weaken. I'm not obsessing, Carly. I'm admiring. He straightened back up, his expression unashamed and intoxicatingly confident. But if you think the photo was a problem, just wait for the real thing. I've always preferred the view from the front. Chapter 7. The Sunday Roast Inquisition. The Callahan household was in a state of tactical readiness. It was Sunday, which meant the traditional roast dinner, but the atmosphere was less family bonding and more war room. Arthur Callahan was at the head of the table, flipping through a grainy set of photos he'd taken with a long-range lens. I'm telling you, Beatrice, the man doesn't have a pulse. I watched him for 40 minutes at the gate. He didn't blink, not once. Maybe he's just focused, dear, Beatrice said, fussing over a centerpiece of blue hydrangeas. Tess, did you see his hands? A man's hands tell you everything. Are they calloused? Does he wear a ring? He wears the weight of the world, Mom, Tess muttered, stabbing a potato. And he's incredibly annoying. He thinks he can just command the sun to rise at 5 a.m. because he's the apex or whatever. Sloane Callahan, looking sharp even in loungewear, leaned in. I looked into the contract he sent your firm, Tess. It's ironclad, but there's a massive discretion clause. If you leak a single blueprint, he doesn't just sue you, he basically owns your lineage. Why would a logistics mogul need that much secrecy for a residential build? Because he's a werewolf, Leo chirped from the end of the table, his mouth full of bread. The table went silent. Tess stared at her brother. Leo, don't be ridiculous. This isn't one of your fantasy games. I'm serious. Leo held up his tablet. I hacked into the employee health insurance portal for Primal Infrastructure. You know what I found? 0 claims for the flu. 0 claims for broken bones. But their protein powder budget? It's higher than the GDP of a small country. Also, I traced his Bluetooth handle. The Apex isn't just a cool name. In biological terms, it's the top of the food chain. He's just a fitness freak with good genes, Tess argued, though her mind flashed back to the way Dominic's eyes had glowed on the balcony, and the way Jack the Ripper, the dog who had once tried to fight a mail truck, had sat submissively at his feet. I don't care if he's a werewolf or a warlock, Beatrice declared, pointing a serving spoon at Tess. He's the first man who hasn't run away after 10 minutes of your talking. He has patience. And he's handsome. You're 30, Tessa. Jack the Ripper is not a sustainable long-term partner. Jack is very supportive, Tess defended, glancing at the dog, who was currently under the table, successfully chewing the heel off one of Sloane's pumps. He's eating my shoe, Sloane shrieked, kicking out. The dinner devolved into the usual chaos. Arthur arguing about shadow governments, Leo trying to explain cryptozoology, and Beatrice trying to find a florist in the city who could handle a billionaire's wedding on short notice. Tess sat in the middle of it, feeling that familiar, nagging loneliness. She loved her family, but they were a storm. For a moment, she thought about the strange, heavy silence of Dominic's office, the way it felt like the world stopped when he looked at her. She pulled out her phone and looked at the black business card. It was vibrating. Just a tiny, rhythmic hum, like a heartbeat. Chapter 8. The 5 a.m. Ambush. At exactly 4:59 a.m., a low, powerful engine rumble vibrated through Tessa's front door. She was standing in her kitchen, nursing a massive coffee and wearing rugged hiking boots she hadn't touched in 3 years. Jack the Ripper was already at the door, whining and wagging his entire body. "Traitor," Tess whispered to the dog. She opened the door to find Dominic Thornvane leaning against a customized, mud-splattered off-road vehicle. He was wearing a dark Henley with the sleeves pushed up, revealing forearms that looked like they were corded with steel. "You're on time," he noted, his voice sounding like velvet in the morning mist. "I'm impressed." "Don't get used to it. I'm only here because my brother thinks you're a cryptid and my father thinks you're a spy. I need to prove them wrong so I can eat dinner in peace." Dominic opened the passenger door for her. As she climbed in, his hand brushed her lower back. It wasn't an accidental touch. It was a lingering, possessive heat that sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. Tess stiffened, her sass momentarily failing her. "And the dog?" Dominic asked, looking at Jack. "He goes where I go. He's my structural integrity consultant." Dominic laughed, the sound warm and genuine. He hopped into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb with a smooth power that suggested he was one with the machine. They drove in silence for an hour, leaving the city behind and heading into the deep, ancient forests of the foothills. The road turned from asphalt to gravel and then to a dirt track that seemed to disappear into the trees. "Where are we going, Dominic? My GPS stopped working 10 miles ago." "We're going to the heart of the pack," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I want you to see why Ironwood matters. It's not just a building, Tessa. It's a sanctuary. The world is getting smaller. Technology is making it harder for my people to live in peace. We need a place that is invisible to the eye, but invincible to the touch." "Your people," Tess repeated, her heart racing. "You talk about them like a tribe. Or a nation." "We are both," Dominic said. He stopped the car in a clearing that overlooked a hidden valley. The sun was just beginning to peek over the mountains, bathing the forest in gold. Tess stepped out of the car and gasped. In the valley below, a massive construction site was underway. But it wasn't like any site she'd ever seen. There were no loud radios, no swearing workers. There were dozens of people moving in perfect, silent unison. They were carrying beams that should have required cranes. They were moving with a speed that defied human biology. "Look at them, Tessa," Dominic said, standing behind her, his chest nearly touching her back. "Tell me what you see." "I see impossible physics," she whispered. Suddenly, a massive gray shape burst from the tree line on the opposite side of the clearing. It was a wolf, but it was the size of a grizzly bear. It stopped, its silver fur shimmering in the light, and let out a howl that shook the very ground Tess was standing on. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Her engineering brain went into overdrive, trying to calculate the mass and force of such a creature. Dominic didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He just looked at the wolf and gave a sharp, authoritative nod. The wolf huffed, turned, and vanished back into the woods. Tess turned to Dominic, her eyes wide, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. That wasn't a wolf." Dominic stepped closer, his eyes glowing amber in the dawnlight. "No, it wasn't. Now, do you understand why I need those floor reinforcements?" Chapter 9. The Glaring Proof. Tess spent the next 4 hours in a daze of professional focus and existential dread. She walked the site, her boots sinking into the rich earth, as Dominic introduced her to his senior foremen, men and women who all possessed the same predatory grace and unsettling intensity. She saw a woman named Naomi lift a pallet of bricks as if it were a box of tissues. She saw a man named Gideon leap a 10-foot trench without breaking a sweat. But the glaring proof didn't come from their strength. It came from a mistake. A heavy steel joist, improperly secured by a temporary winch, snapped. It swung like a lethal pendulum toward a young worker who was distracted. Tess reacted before she could think. "Look out!" she screamed, lunging forward to grab the worker's vest and pull him back. She succeeded in moving him, but the momentum carried her right into the path of the swinging steel. She braced for the impact, for the sound of her own bones shattering. Instead, she felt a wall of heat. Dominic was there. He hadn't run, he had appeared. He caught the 2-ton steel beam with one hand. The force of the impact should have torn his arm from his shoulder. Instead, his muscles bunched, his shirt ripping at the seams to reveal a torso that looked like it was forged from living stone. Tess looked up and froze. Dominic's face was changing. His jaw was sharper, his teeth more prominent, and his eyes, they weren't just amber anymore. They were glowing with a fierce golden light that seemed to burn through her very soul. He roared, a sound that wasn't human, a sound that vibrated in her marrow, and tossed the steel beam 20 feet away like it was a piece of scrap wood. The entire site went dead silent. Dominic stood there, his chest heaving, his claws slowly retracting into his fingertips. He turned to Tess, his expression a mix of raw fury and agonizing concern. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice a guttural growl. Tess stared at his hand. The skin was red, bruised, and bleeding. But as she watched, the wounds began to knit together. The blood vanished. The skin smoothed over. In less than 10 seconds, there wasn't even a scar. You're a..." Tess stammered, her logical mind finally snapping under the weight of the impossible. "I'm the Alpha, Tessa," Dominic said, his voice softening as the gold faded from his eyes. He stepped toward her, reaching out a hand, but she flinched back. The pain that flashed across his face was so sharp, so human, that it hurt her to look at it. "I'm still the man who whispered to you on the balcony," he said softly. "I'm still the man who wants to build a home. I just have a very large family to protect." Tess looked around at the workers. Every one of them was watching her. They weren't looking at her like an intruder anymore. They were looking at her with a strange, burgeoning respect. "You're werewolves," Tess whispered, the word finally catching in her throat. "Leo was right. My brother, the idiot gamer, was actually right." "We are the Greater Meridian Pack," Dominic said, standing tall. "And this is our secret, one I have just placed in your hands." Tess looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the power, the danger, and the terrifying responsibility he carried. And then, her sharp wit, her shield, came roaring back. "Well," she breathed, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "I hope you have a really good lawyer, Dominic, because the insurance premiums on this place just tripled." Chapter 10. The Simp King's Forgiveness. The drive back to the city was fraught with a different kind of tension. Tess was vibrating with a mix of adrenaline and 1,000 questions, while Dominic seemed content to let her process in silence. Jack the Ripper was asleep in the back, his head resting on a bag of high-end dog treats Dominic had accidentally left in the car. "So," Tess said finally, her voice cracking the silence. "The airdrop. You knew the second you saw me, didn't you?" "I knew before I saw the photo," Dominic said, his eyes on the road. "My security team usually blocks incoming connections, but I had overridden the protocol that night. I was bored, Tessa. I was scanning the room's digital traffic, hoping for a distraction. Then you appeared on my screen like a bolt of lightning. I smelled you. Mint and lightning. It's a scent that has haunted my dreams for years, even though I'd never met you. The photo was just a delightful confirmation." "The mate bond," Tess whispered, remembering her brother's theories. Is it a choice? Or are you just biologically programmed to like me?" Dominic pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to her. He took her hand, his touch gentle, his thumb stroking her palm. "The bond is a pull, Tessa, like gravity, but how I respond to it? That is a choice. I could have claimed you that night. I could have forced my way into your life." "You did force your way into my life. You hired my firm." "I invited you," Dominic corrected with a faint smile. "I wanted you to see me. All of me. I want you to choose me back, Tessa, not because of a bond, but because you want a man who can handle your fire." Tess looked at their joined hands. She felt the heat, the safety, and the terrifying lure of him. "I don't do submissive, Dominic. I don't do Luna or whatever you call it. I have a company to run. I have a dog who eats shoes. I have a family that is one step away from a reality TV show." "I know," Dominic said, leaning in. He kissed her forehead, a soft, lingering gesture that felt more intimate than a full kiss. "And I wouldn't have you any other way. Be as feisty as you want. Berate me. Henpeck me. Tell me my blueprints are trash. I will take it all, as long as I get to be the one you come home to. Tess felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was crazy, but her heart was singing a different tune. I'm still doubling my fee, she whispered. I'll pay it, Dominic replied, his eyes full of adoration. In fact, I'll triple it if you let me take you to dinner tonight. A real dinner, no business, no secret vaults. And my family? They're invited too, Dominic said, a mischievous glint in his eye. I believe your father has some questions about a shipping container from 1994 that I'd be happy to answer. Tess sighed, leaning back into the leather seat. You're a very dangerous man, Dominic Thornvane. Only for you, Tessa, he whispered. Only for you. As they drove back into the city, Tess looked out the window at the skyline. It looked the same, but her world had shifted on its axis. She was an architect who had spent her life building walls. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to let someone tear them down. Chapter 11. The Sunday Night Summit. The Callahan dining room felt like a courtroom where the defendant was a billionaire werewolf and the jury was a group of people who couldn't agree on the pizza toppings. Tess stood in the kitchen, gripping a glass of wine like a lifeline, while the sound of her father's interrogation echoed from the living room. So, Mr. Thornvane, Arthur's voice was gravelly and accusatory. A 1994 manifest for Primal Logistics, 3 containers of industrial cooling units arrived in the port of Portland, were flagged for inspection, and then sat in a holding yard for 3 decades under a shell company name. They just reappeared on the active manifest. Care to explain how a company that hasn't even existed for 30 years on paper has a legacy of disappearing cargo? Tess peeked around the corner. Dominic was sitting on the Callahan's floral-patterned sofa, which looked ridiculously small beneath his massive frame. He didn't look flustered. In fact, he looked charmed. He was leaning forward, hands clasped, nodding with genuine interest. You have a sharp eye for detail, Arthur, Dominic said, his voice smooth and respectful. The 1994 incident was a transition period. We were moving specialized medical equipment for a community that values privacy. The paperwork was intentionally obscured to prevent corporate espionage. But I can tell you, that cargo reached its destination. It saved quite a few lives. Privacy or piracy? Arthur pushed, squinting through his bifocals. Dominic, dear, don't mind him, Beatrice chirped, sweeping into the room with a tray of artisanal cheeses. He thinks the mailman is a deep-cover operative. Tell me about your mother. Does she like peonies? I'm thinking a spring palette would suit a man of your stature. Mother? Tess hissed, stepping into the room. We are having a business dinner, not a bridal consultation. Dominic is here because he's my client. A client who brings a 3-pound prime rib for the dog? Leo pointed toward the kitchen, where Jack the Ripper was currently vibrating with joy as he gnawed on a bone the size of a human femur. Tess, face it, the guy is simping hard. Also, I noticed your security card has an RFID chip that pulses at 40 hertz. That's not standard tech, Dominic. That's biometric synchronization. Are you trying to track her heart rate? Dominic turned his amber gaze to Leo. A slow, knowing smirk spread across his face. You're very talented, Leo. Most people wouldn't notice the frequency. It's for her safety. My world can be volatile. Tess crossed her arms, her sass bubbling up. Volatile is an understatement. You caught a steel beam with your hand yesterday. You're lucky I didn't report you to the Department of Labor for being a biological anomaly. Dominic stood up, and the air in the room seemed to densify. He looked at Tess, ignoring the family for a heartbeat. I would have been honored to be reported by you, Tessa, as long as you were the one conducting the inspection. Oh, she'll conduct an inspection, all right, Sloane remarked, walking in and leaning against the doorframe. She's been doing a background check on your architectural history all morning. She found 6 projects where the contractor was listed as a shell company owned by a trust in the Cayman Islands. You're either very private or you're building a lair. I'm building a home, Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave as he looked at Tess. And I've hired the only woman who can make sure the walls are strong enough to hold my heart. Beatrice let out a theatrical gasp. Arthur grumbled about tax havens. Tess felt her face turn a shade of red that matched her favorite lipstick. She wanted to yell at him for being cheesy, but the way he said it, with such quiet, patient certainty, made her sharp tongue falter. Chapter 12. The Shadow in the Data. The dinner was a chaotic success. Dominic had survived Arthur's conspiracy theories, charmed Beatrice with his knowledge of rare orchids, and even gained Leo's respect by promising to show him a truly decentralized server. But as the night wound down and Dominic walked Tess to her porch, the mood shifted. "You didn't have to do that," Tess said, leaning against the doorframe. "You didn't have to entertain them." "I wanted to," Dominic said, his hand coming up to rest on the wood beside her head. The scent of cedar and ozone was intoxicating in the cool night air. "They are part of you, Tessa, and if I want to be part of you, I have to prove I can handle the storm." "I'm not a storm, Dominic. I'm a structural engineer. I deal in facts and reinforced concrete." "And yet, you're the most unpredictable force I've ever met," he whispered, leaning in. He didn't kiss her, but he lingered close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "But we have a problem. Your brother wasn't the only one looking into my servers today." Tess's professional mask snapped back into place. "What do you mean?" "Someone tried to breach the Project Ironwood blueprints 3 hours ago. They used a high-velocity phishing attack that originated from a node in Zurich. My security team blocked them, but they were persistent. They weren't looking for money. They were looking for the structural weaknesses of the sanctuary." Tess felt a cold shiver. Who would want that? It's a private residence. "The Obsidian Directive," Dominic said, his eyes flashing gold in the dark. "A group of humans who have spent years trying to quantify my kind. They see us as a resource to be harvested. If they find out an architect of your caliber is involved, you'll become a target." "I can take care of myself," Tess snapped, her independence flaring. "I have a high-security penthouse and a dog who shreds luxury leather for sport." "Jack is a good boy, but he can't stop a drone-delivered neurotoxin," Dominic said firmly. "Tessa, I'm doubling the security around your firm, and I'm assigning Gideon to follow you." "Absolutely not! I don't need a bodyguard, especially not a brooding wolfman who looks like he eats boulders for breakfast." Dominic sighed, a sound of profound patience. "Then let me install the Aegis glass in your office. It's my own composite. It's unbreakable. Please, Tess, do it for my peace of mind. Or do it because I'm paying you 3 times your normal rate." "I'll do it for the money," Tess lied, her heart thumping against her ribs. "But Gideon stays 50 feet away at all times, and tell him if he touches my Porsche, I'll redesign his living quarters to have 3-foot ceilings." Dominic laughed, the tension breaking. "Deal. I'll tell him to watch his head." As he walked away, Tess looked down at the matte black card in her hand. It was vibrating again, but this time it wasn't just a heartbeat, it was a warning. Chapter 13. The First Breach. 3 days later, the modern world collided with the shifter world in a way Tess hadn't anticipated. She was at her office at Callahan Constructs, staring at a complex HVAC schematic for Ironwood, when her computer screen flickered. A small icon appeared in the corner, a stylized black diamond. "Leo?" Tess muttered, reaching for her phone. "If you're hacking my workstation again, I'm changing the Wi-Fi password to Leo is a nerd." "It's not me, Tess!" Leo's voice came through the phone, sounding frantic. "I'm watching your outbound traffic right now. Someone is mirroring your screen. They're bypassing my encryption like it's not even there. Get out of the building!" Tess stood up, her heart racing. "What are you talking about?" "The Obsidian Directive," Leo hissed. "They didn't go for Dominic's servers this time. They went for yours. They know you're the one who designed the ventilation overrides. They want to know how to gas the sanctuary." Suddenly, the glass windows of her office, the Aegis glass Dominic had insisted on installing, vibrated with a dull thud. A drone the size of a dinner plate was hovering outside, a small red laser dot dancing across Tess's desk. "Margot, call security!" Tess yelled to her assistant, but the office was eerily silent. She realized with a jolt of horror that the high-frequency hum she was hearing was an electronic jammer. The drone outside fired. A small, pressurized canister smashed against the glass. The Aegis glass didn't shatter inward. It spiderwebbed, the reinforced polymer layer absorbing the kinetic energy of an impact that would have killed Tess instantly. "Jack, under the desk!" Tess commanded. The pit bull, sensing the shift in the air, didn't bark. He bared his teeth, a low, guttural growl vibrating in his chest that sounded remarkably like the wolves at the site. The office door burst open. It wasn't an assassin, it was Gideon. He didn't say a word. He moved with a speed that blurred Tess's vision. He grabbed a heavy metal paperweight from her desk and hurled it through the small gap in the door. There was a sound of shattering plastic and a small explosion outside. The drone was gone. Gideon turned to Tess, his eyes glowing a faint, menacing blue. "The Alpha was right. They are testing the perimeter. We're moving you to the monolith. Now." "I'm not leaving my firm," Tess argued, even as she grabbed her laptop. "And I'm not being moved like a piece of furniture." "Miss Callahan," Gideon said, his voice like grinding stone, "you can argue with me while you're safe, or you can argue with the people who just tried to put a hole in your head. Choose fast." Tess looked at the cracked glass, then at her trembling hands. Her sass was still there, but her logic was louder. "Fine, but I'm driving my own car, and Jack sits in the front." Chapter 14. The Monolith's Embrace. The Obsidian Monolith, Dominic's headquarters, felt different when you were entering it as a refugee rather than a consultant. The security protocols were notched up to a level that made Tessa's head spin. Biometric scans, scent verifiers, and a literal gauntlet of stone-faced shifters who watched her with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Dominic was waiting in the private elevator. The moment the doors opened and he saw the cracked screen of her laptop and the dust on her suit, his composure fractured. The Alpha's presence hit the small space like a physical shockwave. The lights flickered, and the air grew heavy with the scent of a predator on the hunt. He crossed the space in one stride, his hands framing Tessa's face. "Did they touch you?" he demanded, his voice a terrifyingly soft growl. "I'm fine, Dominic. The glass held," Tess said, her voice steadier than she felt. She reached up and pulled his hands down, her fingers interlacing with his. "You were right. I hate it when you're right." Dominic closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers. The oppressive aura in the room instantly vanished, replaced by a desperate, protective warmth. "I don't want to be right, Tessa. I want you to be safe. They are getting bold. They used a localized EMP to shadow that drone. They shouldn't have that technology." "They were looking for the ventilation overrides," Tess said, pulling back to look at him. "They know about the sanctuary's layout. How?" "A leak," Dominic spat. "Not from the pack. From the human contractors we used for the initial excavation before you arrived. Someone sold the topographical data." "Then we changed the layout," Tess said, her eyes sparking with a familiar fire. "If they think they know the way in, we build a new one. We turn the sanctuary into a labyrinth. I'll redesign the entire basement level tonight." Dominic looked at her, this tiny, fierce woman who had just been attacked and was already planning a counteroffensive. He felt a surge of pride so potent it made his wolf howl. "You're going to stay here," Dominic said, "in my private suite. It's the most secure location in the hemisphere." "Only if there's a separate bed for Jack," Tess countered, "and I want access to your high-speed mainframe. If they're hacking me, I'm hacking them back. My brother is already on standby." "Your brother?" Dominic asked, amused. "Leo doesn't just play games, Dominic. He's a digital arsonist. If the Obsidian Directive wants a war, they're about to find out that the Callahans don't just build things. We know exactly how to tear them down." Chapter 15. The Silent Rival. While Tess and Dominic were fortifying the monolith, a different kind of meeting was happening in a sterile, white office 60 floors above the city's financial district. Alistair Sterling Grant, the CEO of the Silver Helix, stood in front of a wall of monitors. On the screen was the selfie Tess had airdropped to Dominic. It had been intercepted by their packet sniffers weeks ago. "She's the key," Alistair said, his voice thin and clinical. He wasn't a shifter, and he didn't have a pack. He had a board of directors and a multi-billion-dollar research budget. Thornvane's biology is the most stable we've ever seen, but he's guarded. He's careful, except when it comes to her. The drone failed, a woman's voice said from the shadows. Katerina Volkov, the mercenary enforcer, stepped into the light. She looked like a professional athlete, her eyes cold and calculating. The glass she used is a new polymer. It's better than ours. She's an architect, Alistair mused. She understands the soul of a structure. If we can't get to Thornvane, we use the woman. We don't need to kill her. We just need to make him choose between his secret and her life. He turned to a new screen, showing a live feed of the Callahan household. Arthur was in the backyard, still looking for conspiracies. Beatrice was trimming roses. The family is the weakness, Alistair continued. They are human, fragile, unprotected. The Alpha has a bodyguard on them, Katerina noted. Then we don't use force, Alistair smiled. We use the law. Contact our friends in the zoning department. I want the Callahan engineering firm shut down by morning. Investigation for structural negligence. Let's see how feisty Miss Callahan is when her legacy is being dismantled piece by piece. Back at the monolith, Tess sat at a massive workstation, her glasses sliding down her nose as she typed furiously. She felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. She looked at Dominic, who was watching her from across the room with such intoxicating adoration that she almost forgot the danger. She didn't know yet that the war wasn't coming to the sanctuary. It was coming for her name. Chapter 16. The Paperwork Assassination. Tess was mid-sip of a triple-shot espresso in the monolith's high-tech war room when her phone began to vibrate so violently it skittered across the glass table. It wasn't a call from Dominic. It was Margot, her assistant, sounding like she was in the middle of a hyperventilation exercise. Tess! They're here! Men in suits, not the nice Dominic-style suits, but the I'm from the government suits. They've cordoned off the office with yellow tape. Tess stood up so fast her chair hit the reinforced wall with a dull thud. What? On what grounds, Margot? I pay my taxes and my structural integrity reports are the gold standard of this city. They're claiming gross professional negligence on the Riverfront Plaza project from 3 years ago. They say the foundation is shifting and that you falsified the soil density samples. Tess, they're revoking your engineering license pending a full criminal investigation. The world tilted. Tess's firm, Callahan Constructs, was her life's work. Every brick, every beam, every sleepless night was being erased by a bureaucrat's pen. She knew instantly this wasn't about a faulty foundation. This was Alistair Sterling Grant and the Silver Helix trying to cut her legs out from under her. Don't let them touch the servers, Margot. I'm coming down there. Miss Callahan, you are doing no such thing. Gideon's voice rumbled from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, his arms crossed over a chest that looked like it was carved from the same obsidian as the building. Move, Gideon, or I will use my architectural expertise to find the specific pressure point on your kneecap that makes you fold like a lawn chair. Tess grabbed her leather jacket, her eyes blazing with a fury that made even the stoic shifter blink. The Alpha has already dispatched a legal team that makes your sister Sloane look like a public defender, Gideon said, unmoving. If you go down there, you give them a target. Here, you are a ghost in a fortress. There, you're just a woman they can handcuff for the evening news. I am not just a woman, Tess shouted, her voice echoing in the vast, sterile room. I am the woman who built this city's skyline. If they want to fight about foundations, I'll show them how deep mine go. She paced the room, her mind racing. Dominic entered moments later, his face a mask of controlled, icy rage. He didn't look at Gideon, he looked only at Tess. He saw the tremble in her hands that she was trying so hard to hide with her sass. Tessa, he said, his voice a low, soothing vibration. Don't Tessa me, Dominic. Your world is bleeding into mine. They're destroying my reputation, my family name. Dominic walked over, ignoring her defensive posture, and took her hands in his. His grip was firm, warm, and grounded. I know, and I promise you, by the time the sun sets, Alistair Sterling Grant will realize that attacking your name was the last mistake he will ever make. But I need you to stay here and do what you do best. Redesign the sanctuary. Make it a tomb for anyone who tries to enter. While you build the walls, I will be the one who tears theirs down." Tess looked into his amber eyes and saw the Simp King had vanished, replaced by the Alpha King ready to go to war for his mate. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just gripped his hands back and whispered, "Don't just tear them down, level the site." Chapter 17. The Pack Rallies. While the legal battle raged in the city, the atmosphere inside the obsidian monolith shifted. It wasn't just Dominic who was protective of Tess anymore, it was the entire Greater Meridian Pack. Tess found this out when she tried to go to the monolith's cafeteria for a sandwich. Everywhere she went, shifters stopped what they were doing and bowed their heads slightly. It wasn't the subservient bow they gave Dominic, it was a nod of recognition. "Why is everyone acting like I'm a holy relic?" Tess asked Naomi, the pack's lead researcher, who was currently analyzing the drone debris. Naomi looked up, a small, knowing smile on her face. "You saved the Alpha's life at the site, Tess. You pulled a worker out of the way and stood your ground against a falling joist. In our world, competency is more valuable than gold. And the fact that you're a feisty human who tells our king to shut up? Well, the pack finds it hilarious." "I don't tell him to shut up," Tess muttered, though she knew it was a lie. "I just offer constructive criticism on his personality." "Whatever you call it, you're one of us now," Naomi said, sliding a tablet over. "And since you're one of us, I thought you'd like to see this. We traced the soil density report the city is using to frame you. It was forged using a digital signature from a former employee of yours, someone who was fired for theft 2 years ago." Tess's eyes narrowed. Benny, that little rat. He went to work for a subsidiary of Silver Helix. "He did, and right now, your brother Leo is currently visiting Benny's home network. It turns out Benny kept a very detailed digital diary of every bribe he's taken." Tess felt a surge of hope. Her family wasn't sitting idly by. Leo was hacking, Sloane was likely preparing a multi-million-dollar defamation suit, and even her father, Arthur, was probably outside the Helix headquarters with a notepad and a pair of binoculars. The lone wolf architect realized she wasn't alone. She had a pack of her own, one made of blood and another made of fur. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived at the monolith. It wasn't for Dominic. It was a massive crate addressed to Tess Callahan. Inside was a designer sofa, the exact model Jack the Ripper had shredded the week before, with a note attached. "For the dog. I figured he needed something to work on while you're busy saving my people. D." Tess looked at the sofa, then at Jack, who was already sniffing the leather with professional interest. She felt a lump in her throat. Dominic wasn't just protecting her, he was taking care of the pieces of her life that made her her. "He's such a show-off," she whispered, wiping a stray tear. "But he's a show-off with very good taste in furniture." Chapter 18. The Labyrinth of Ironwood. Tess threw herself into the redesign of Project Ironwood with a ferocity that bordered on the supernatural. If Alistair wanted to use the original blueprints against them, she would make those blueprints a death trap. She spent 18 hours straight at her workstation, her glasses pushed up onto her head, her hair a chaotic mess of dark curls. She integrated the frequency-based security Dominic's team provided with her own knowledge of structural decoys. "I'm turning the basement into a series of pressurized chambers," she explained to Dominic as he brought her a late-night plate of food. He had become her personal waiter, ensuring she ate even when she was too focused to breathe. If someone enters without the correct biometric signature, the floors will shift 3 inches. To a human, it feels like an earthquake. To a shifter, it's a signal to move to the extraction point. Dominic stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. His touch was a grounding force in the sea of digital lines and stress test calculations. "And the ventilation? I've rerouted the main ducts through a limestone filtration system. Even if they use the silver gas, the stone will neutralize the pH before it reaches the living quarters. And," she smirked, a wicked glint in her eye, "I've added a backblast feature. If the sensors detect a foreign toxin, the fans reverse. They'll be gassing themselves." Dominic leaned down, his lips brushing her temple. "You are a terrifying woman, Tessa Callahan. I'm incredibly glad you're on my side." I'm on the side of structural integrity, she countered, though she didn't pull away. And I don't like people touching my buildings. It's a matter of principle. Is it just principle? Dominic whispered, his hand sliding down to her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The heat between them was no longer just a mate bond pull, it was a choice. A deliberate, simmering tension that had been building since that first accidental airdrop. Tess turned in his arms, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. She looked at his face, the patient, adoring king who had let her berate him, boss him around, and use his multi-billion-dollar mainframe to seek revenge. "You're a distraction, Dominic," she breathed, her hands finding the lapels of his shirt. "I have work to do. I have a firm to save." "The firm is being handled," Dominic said, his eyes darkening to a rich, molten amber. "The evidence Leo found has already been leaked to the press. The city is withdrawing the injunction as we speak. You're a hero again, Tess. A victim of corporate sabotage." Tess blinked, the weight of the last few days finally lifting. "It's over? Just like that?" "It's just beginning," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, intoxicating depth. "But for tonight, the only thing that matters is this room, and how much I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw your face on my phone." He didn't wait for her to answer. He claimed her mouth in a kiss that tasted like cedar, rain, and 1,000 years of waiting. Chapter 19. Surrender at the Monolith. The kiss was a structural collapse. Every wall Tess had built around her heart, every reinforced barrier of independence and "I don't need anyone," crumbled under the sheer, intoxicating force of Dominic's devotion. He didn't treat her like something fragile. He treated her like his equal, a force of nature that he finally had permission to touch. He lifted her onto the edge of the mahogany desk, scattering blueprints and tablets to the floor. Tess didn't care. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, her fingers tangling in his dark hair as she kissed him back with a hunger that surprised even her. "You're so bossy," she whispered against his lips, her breath hitching as his hands traced the line of her thighs. "And you're so stubborn," Dominic countered, his voice a low growl of pure affection. "I've spent weeks being henpecked by you, Tessa. I think I've earned a little bit of your time." The romance was raw and passionate, a collision of two people who were used to being in control finally letting go. In the safety of the monolith, surrounded by the technology of the future and the secrets of the past, Tess surrendered herself to him. It wasn't a surrender of her strength, but a merging of it with his. As they lay together on the oversized velvet sofa hours later, the city lights twinkling far below, Tess felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she was missing. Jack the Ripper was fast asleep at the foot of the couch, his chin resting on one of Dominic's discarded shoes. "You know my dad is still going to think you're a spy, right?" Tess said, her head resting on Dominic's chest. "I'd be disappointed if he didn't," Dominic chuckled, his arm tightening around her. "And your mother will likely want to know the exact square footage of the Ironwood ballroom for the reception." "Don't get ahead of yourself, Wolf King," Tess teased, though she was smiling. "We still have Alistair to deal with. He won't stop just because his legal play failed." "Let him come," Dominic said, his eyes glowing with a calm, lethal certainty. "He's playing a game of chess, we're playing a game of survival, and he has no idea that the most dangerous person in this room isn't the alpha, it's the woman who designed his cage." Chapter 20. The Silent Twist. The next morning, the funny twist that would captivate the pack, and the city, began with a simple phone call from Arthur Callahan. "Tess, you won't believe it! I found the shipping container, the one from 1994. Tess sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. "Dad, it's 6 a.m. Dominic already explained that. It was medical supplies." No, the manifest was fake, but the contents were even weirder. I tracked down the old dock worker who handled the offload. He said the containers weren't full of medicine. They were full of vintage chew toys and industrial-grade dog beds. Tess looked at Dominic, who was currently being used as a pillow by Jack the Ripper. Dominic opened one eye, looking sheepish. "Dominic?" Tess asked, her voice dangerous. "Was the 1994 secret cargo just a massive shipment of dog supplies?" Dominic rubbed his face. The pack had a population boom that year, and we found a manufacturer in Sweden that made indestructible rubber bones using a non-toxic polymer that doesn't exist anymore. We bought their entire remaining stock, enough to last 50 years. We didn't want the human world to know why we were hoarding a lifetime supply of industrial-grade chew toys. It would have looked suspicious. Tess burst out laughing. The terrifying secret her father had been chasing for weeks was nothing more than an alpha king making sure his pack's puppies had enough toys to keep them from eating the furniture. "Wait, there's more!" Arthur shouted over the phone. "I'm at the docks now, and guess who just pulled up in a silver Helix van? That Alistair fellow. He's looking for the same containers. He thinks there's a biological weapon in there." Tess looked at Dominic, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "Dominic, do you think Alistair would be disappointed to find a bunch of 30-year-old rubber chickens instead of a virus?" "I think," Dominic said, pulling her back down into the pillows, "that it would be the perfect, nice angle for his evening news." But the laughter died down as a new notification popped up on Tess's tablet. A message from Leo. "Tess, the Helix isn't at the docks for the containers. They're using them as a distraction. They've just launched a multi-pronged kinetic strike on the Callahan house. Mom and Sloan are inside. Gideon is down." The war had officially moved from the office to the home. Chapter 21. The Domestic War Zone. The Monolith's command center was bathed in a rhythmic, pulsing red light. Tess didn't wait for Dominic to give an order. She was already at the holographic terminal, her fingers dancing across the keys as she pulled up the blueprints of her childhood home. "Dominic, the docks are a ghost hunt. Sterling Grant is at the shipping yard because he thinks he's found a biological weapon, but his tactical team is at our front door." Tess's voice was like tempered steel. The panic that should have been there was suppressed by her engineering brain, the part of her that understood that every structure had a breaking point, including a suburban house. "I'm already in the air," Dominic's voice rumbled over the comms, the sound of wind whipping past him. He wasn't in a jet. He was moving across the city rooftops with a speed no vehicle could match. "Gideon is unresponsive. He took a heavy-duty sedative dart to the neck. He's alive, but he's out. Tess, Mom and Sloan are in the kitchen." "The kitchen is the worst place to be," Tess hissed, her eyes scanning the structural load points of the Callahan residence. "It's all glass and open concept. They need to get to the basement, but the stairs are in the line of sight of the front windows." She patched into the house's smart system, one that Leo had enhanced years ago. "Leo, get off the dock cam. I need you to trigger the exterior floodlights in a strobe pattern. Disorient the mercenaries. I'm calling Mom." The phone rang twice before Beatrice picked up. There was a sound of shattering porcelain in the background. "Tess, darling, there are very rude men in black tactical gear trampling my begonias. And Sloan is trying to hit one with a cast-iron skillet." "Mom, listen to me," Tess shouted. "Drop the skillet. Get into the pantry. The back wall of the pantry is reinforced. I had it done during the 2022 renovation. There's a floor hatch behind the shelf of canned peaches. Go, now!" "The peaches? But I just organized those," Beatrice complained, even as Tess heard the heavy thud of Sloan grabbing her mother and dragging her toward the pantry. Tess watched the heat map on her screen. 4 thermal signatures were breaching the front door. They weren't using silencers, they were using kinetic rams. This wasn't a kidnapping, it was a statement. "Dominic, they're inside," Tess said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The floorboards in the hallway are 1950s oak. They're loud. If Mom stays quiet, they won't find the hatch. But the mercenaries are headed for the stairs." "I'm 2 minutes out," Dominic growled. The sound of his voice changed. It became deeper, more guttural. The alpha was shifting. "Tell them to hold on. I'm going to tear that house apart to get to them." "Don't you dare tear it apart!" Tess snapped, her sass returning even in the face of death. "I just finished the structural audit. Use the chimney, Dominic. The flue is wide enough for a shifter if you don't fully bulk out. It drops you right into the living room behind their flank." Even in his rage, Dominic paused. "The chimney? Tess, I'm wearing a $5,000 suit." "It's the soot or the suit, Wolf King. Pick one." Chapter 22. Chimneys and cast iron. Dominic Thornvane did not like chimneys, but as he crested the roof of the Callahan house, smelling the chemical tang of the mercenaries' weapons and the terrified scent of his mate's family, he didn't hesitate. He constricted his muscle mass, a painful, grinding adjustment of bone and sinew, and dropped down the flue like a vengeful shadow. In the living room below, 3 mercenaries from the Silver Helix were moving toward the pantry. Their leader, a man with a jagged scar across his nose, raised his weapon. "Check the closets. Sterling Grant wants the sister as leverage. Kill the mother if she's a nuisance." He never finished the sentence. The fireplace exploded outward in a cloud of soot and brick. A dark, massive shape erupted from the hearth. Dominic didn't even shift into his full wolf form. He stayed in the half-shift, a terrifying hybrid of man and beast, with claws like obsidian razors and eyes that burned like twin suns. He hit the first mercenary with the force of a freight train, slamming him through the drywall and into the dining room. The second man fired, but Dominic was a blur. He caught the barrel of the rifle, snapping it like a toothpick, and backhanded the man across the room. From the pantry, Sloane Callahan's voice rang out. "If that's you, Dominic, you're late! And you're getting soot on the rug!" Dominic let out a huff that might have been a laugh if he wasn't currently disarming the third man. "The rug can be replaced." He grabbed the leader by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "Who sent you? Is Alistair at the docks?" The leader choked, his eyes bulging. "The docks were just the start. We're the secondary wave. The third wave is already at the monolith. We didn't come for the family. We came to draw you out." Dominic's blood went cold. He dropped the man and tapped his earpiece. Tess, come in. It's a feint. They're coming for you at the monolith." But all he heard was static. The Silver Helix had initiated a localized, wide-spectrum jammer. Back at the monolith, Tess stood at the holographic table. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the Alpha's presence she usually felt, the warm, protective weight of Dominic's tether, snapped. The room went dark. "Jack?" Tess whispered. The pit bull was standing by the heavy blast doors, his fur standing on end. He wasn't barking. He was emitting a low, vibrating growl that made the floorboards hum. The door to the command center groaned. The reinforced steel, the very material Tess had praised for its strength, began to warp inward. Someone on the other side was using a thermal lance. Tess grabbed her heavy architectural ruler and a canister of pressurized drafting air. It wasn't a gun, but she was a Callahan, and Callahans didn't go down without a fight. Chapter 23. The Architect's Ambush. The door to the monolith's command center didn't just open, it melted. Katerina Volkov stepped through the sparks, her tactical visor glowing a predatory red. She held a sleek, silver submachine gun, but she didn't raise it. She looked at Tess, standing behind a mahogany desk, looking small and defiant, and smirked. "Ms. Callahan, you've been a very difficult woman to track down. Alistair sends his regards. He finds your structural work impressive. Too bad you won't live to see the completion of Ironwood." Tess didn't flinch. She gripped the desk. "You're in my building now, Katerina, and I know every bolt, every wire, and every structural flaw in this room." "It doesn't look like there are many flaws," Katerina said, stepping forward. "Just a lot of expensive wood and a dog that looks like he's about to have a heart attack." "Jack is fine," Tess said calmly. "He's just waiting for the signal." "Signal for what?" Tess hit a button on her desk. "Static load failure." The monolith was a brutalist masterpiece, but Tess had noticed a specific resonance in the floor joists of the command center during her first audit. She had hacked the building's climate control to drop the temperature to near freezing in the floor's substructure, making the metal brittle. Then, she triggered the emergency fire suppression vibration. The floor beneath Katerina's feet didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The mercenary let out a cry as she fell through the trapdoor Tess had essentially created on the fly, dropping 10 feet into a maintenance crawl space. "Jack! Now!" The pit bull didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the hole after her. While Jack couldn't take down a trained mercenary alone, he was a 60-pound ball of muscle and teeth in a confined space. The sounds of barking and Katerina's cursing echoed from the hole. Tess grabbed her laptop and ran for the private elevator. She needed to get to the server room. If she could manual override the building's security, she could trap the rest of the strike team in the elevator shafts. She reached the elevator, but as the doors opened, she wasn't met with an empty car. Alistair Sterling Grant was standing there, looking perfectly composed in a light gray suit. He wasn't at the docks. He had never been at the docks. He held a small glass vial filled with a swirling green gas. "The silver gas," Tess whispered, backing away. "Actually, Miss Callahan, this is the refined version," Alistair said, stepping out. "It doesn't just suppress the shift, it targets the nervous system of anyone with the lupine gene. And since you've been spending so much time with the alpha, I wonder if you've absorbed enough of his pheromones for this to affect you too." Chapter 24. The Proving Taste. Tess felt the air grow thin. Alistair didn't break the vial. He didn't need to. He placed it in a small nebulizer on the wall, and a fine mist began to fill the hallway. Tess's lungs burned. She felt a wave of nausea, her vision blurring. Was Alistair right? Had the mate bond made her biologically susceptible to shifter toxins? She stumbled, her knees hitting the cold stone floor. "You're a parasite, Alistair," she gasped, her sass straining through the pain. "You can't build anything of your own, so you try to steal the life of others." "I'm an evolutionist," Alistair countered, standing over her. "Dominic Thornvane is a relic of a primitive past. You, however, you are a fascinating variable. Why did the king choose an architect? What did he see in you?" He reached down to grab her arm, but Tess wasn't finished. She used the last of her strength to jam her architectural ruler into the nebulizer, smashing the glass. The concentrated gas exploded outward. Alistair coughed, reeling back, but he was human. The gas shouldn't have affected him, except Tess had mixed a little something extra into the air suppression system when she arrived at the monolith. A high-concentration industrial solvent she used for cleaning blueprints. "It's a base acid reaction, you idiot!" Tess yelled, coughing as she crawled away. "Human or shifter, nobody likes breathing in floor stripper." As Alistair clutched his throat, the elevator dings echoed through the hall. Dominic burst out. He was covered in soot, his suit was ruined, and his eyes were full-on gold. He didn't even look at Alistair. He saw Tess on the floor, struggling to breathe, and he let out a roar that shattered every glass light fixture in the hallway. He was at her side in an instant, his large hands trembling as he gathered her into his lap. Tessa, look at me!" She coughed, looking up at his soot-streaked face. You look like a chimney sweep," she wheezed. Dominic let out a sob of relief, crushing her to his chest. He turned his gaze toward Alistair, who was trying to crawl toward the exit. The Alpha King stood up, his shadow stretching long and terrifying across the walls. "Wait," Tess gasped, grabbing Dominic's hand. Don't kill him yet. I need him to see something." Dominic paused, his claws inches from Alistair's throat. "What?" Tess pointed to the monitors on the wall, which were flickering back to life as Leo bypassed the jammer. The screen showed the docks. Arthur Callahan was standing in front of the shipping containers, surrounded by police. "Dad found the real manifest, Alistair," Tess said, a weak but triumphant smirk on her face. "The one you thought was the biological weapon? It's being opened right now." On the screen, the police pried open the container. A mountain of yellow rubber chickens and oversized squeaky bones spilled out onto the concrete. You attacked my family. For dog toys," Tess whispered. Chapter 25. The Luna's Command. The humiliation was the final blow, as the news cameras, summoned by Leo, broadcasted the great rubber chicken heist to the entire city. Alistair Sterling Grant's reputation disintegrated. He was a billionaire who had launched an illegal paramilitary strike to steal a shipment of 1990s pet supplies. The police, led by evidence Sloan had already prepared, moved in to arrest the remaining Silver Helix members. Dominic carried Tess down to the lobby. The entire pack was gathered there. Gideon, who was awake but groggy, Naomi, and hundreds of others. They watched in silence as their Alpha King carried his human mate. Tess insisted he put her down. She stood on her own 2 feet, leaning slightly against his side, her hand still clutching her broken ruler. "Is everyone okay?" she asked, her voice carrying through the lobby. "The family is safe, Tess," Gideon rumbled, bowing his head. "The house has some structural damage, but the pantry held." Tess looked at the pack. She saw the fear they had lived with, the fear of being discovered, of being harvested. And she saw the way they looked at her, not as a guest, not as a victim. She looked at Dominic. "We're moving the completion date for Ironwood up, and I want the security perimeter doubled. If we're going to be a secret, we're going to be the best-built secret in history." Dominic looked at her, his chest swelling with a love so fierce it hurt. He leaned down and whispered into her ear, loud enough for the pack to hear. "As the Luna commands." Tess turned to him, her eyebrows shooting up. "Luna? I told you, I'm an architect. If you want a Luna, find someone who likes howling. I have a firm to rebuild." Dominic laughed, pulling her into a kiss that silenced the entire room. It was a kiss of victory, of relief, and of a future that was finally set in stone. From the back of the crowd, Jack the Ripper emerged, looking slightly singed but very proud of himself, carrying a piece of Katerina's tactical vest in his mouth. "Good boy, Jack," Tess smiled, scratching his ears. "Let's go home. I think there's an Italian leather sofa waiting for us that hasn't been shredded yet." But as they walked toward the exit, Tess's phone pinged. A new notification appeared, not a text, but a direct file transfer. The sender had to be within 30 feet. From unknown. Message. "Nice angle. See you at the trial." Tess stopped, scanning the lobby. She saw the back of a woman in a gray suit slipping out the side door. The war was over, but the legal drama, and the Callahan family's involvement, was just getting started. "Dominic?" "Yes, Tessa?" "I'm going to need a really, really expensive lawyer, and maybe another Porsche, in emerald green." "Done," Dominic smiled. "Anything for my architect." Chapter 26. The PR Nightmare. The aftermath of the rubber chicken heist was less like a victory parade and more like a circus tent collapsing in slow motion. Tess sat in the wreckage of the Monolith's lounge, her feet propped up on a charred ottoman, watching the news ticker. Helix CEO Alistair Sterling Grant denied bail, claims of vicious toy conspiracy dismissed by judge. "I look like a chimney sweep in 4K, Tessa," Dominic grumbled, sitting beside her. He was staring at a viral clip of his soot-covered face emerging from the Callahan chimney. "The internet has named me the Sooty Sultan. My board of directors is asking why I was in a fireplace during a corporate acquisition." "Oh, shut up. You're lucky they don't have a shot of you in half shift," Tess snapped, though she leaned her head against his shoulder. "At least the secret is safe. Nobody believes a man who gets arrested for stealing a container of squeaky bones is hunting werewolves. They just think he's a billionaire who lost his marbles." The doors to the lounge burst open, and Arthur Callahan marched in, clutching a stack of manila folders like they were the Dead Sea Scrolls. "Tess! Dominic! We have a problem. The police are calling those rubber chickens low-priority evidence, but I've been analyzing the serial numbers. These toys weren't made in Sweden. They were manufactured by a front company for a group called the Obsidian Echo." Tess groaned. "Dad, please. Can we just have one day where you aren't chasing ghosts?" "It's not a ghost." Arthur slammed a folder onto the table. "The police are calling those rubber chickens low-priority evidence, but I've been analyzing the serial numbers. These toys weren't made in Sweden. They were manufactured by a front company for a group called the Obsidian Echo." "The Obsidian Echo," Dominic whispered, the color draining from his face. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. "That's not a random name, Arthur. Obsidian was the code name for my father's Black Ops unit. If they are active, it means my sister Mara didn't die in the crash 20 years ago. She's been building an army." Tess stared at him. "Your sister? You mean the villain behind all this is family?" "It appears so," Dominic said, his voice turning to ice. "And she just declared war." Arthur nodded grimly. "Well, she's a busy woman, because someone also sent an airdrop to the entire precinct during the booking. A video of the monolith breach. But the video has been edited. It makes it look like you and Dominic attacked Alistair first. Tessa's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her blood turning to ice. The unknown airdropper from the lobby had sent another file. It was a high-resolution photo of her and Dominic on the balcony from the first night, the night of the accidental selfie. But in this photo, Dominic's eyes were glowing a brilliant, unmistakable gold. Message: one angle you missed. See you in court, Luna. Dominic, Tess whispered, sliding the phone toward him. The Alpha's presence flared, the temperature in the room dropping 5 degrees instantly. He looked at the screen, his jaw tight. Alistair didn't act alone. He was the bankroll, but the architect of this play? They're still out there. And they've been watching us from the very beginning. Who is it? Beatrice Callahan asked, appearing from the kitchen with a plate of stress relief cookies. Because I've seen a very suspicious woman in a gray suit loitering near my hydrangeas this morning. She had a chin like a shovel and eyes like a hawk. Tess looked at Arthur, then back at the phone. The legal battle wasn't just about structural negligence anymore. It was about the existence of the pack. And for the first time, the feisty architect felt the weight of the crown she hadn't asked for. Chapter 27. The Trial of the Century. The courthouse was a limestone beast designed to intimidate and impress. Tess stood on the steps, her emerald green Porsche parked at the curb like a statement of war. She wore a power suit that cost more than a small bridge, her hair slicked back, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood Sloane Callahan, her sister and lead defense attorney. Sloane was currently vibrating with legal bloodlust. Listen to me, Tess. The prosecution is going to try to paint Dominic as a violent extremist and you as his brainwashed accomplice. They're going to use the footage of the monolith floor collapse. I need you to be cold. I need you to be the engineer. I'm always the engineer, Sloane, Tess said, though her eyes were scanning the crowd for the unknown airdropper. They entered the courtroom to a sea of flashing lights. Dominic was already at the defense table, looking calm and dangerously handsome in a dark navy suit. He stood as Tess approached, pulling out her chair with a quiet, devastating devotion that made the gallery whisper. The judge, a formidable woman named Justice Vance, pounded her gavel. This court will come to order. We are here to address the charges of structural endangerment and private paramilitary activity brought against Thorn Vane and Callahan Constructs. The lead prosecutor, a man with a voice like sandpaper named Vance Sterling, no relation to the judge, but certainly a relative of the Silver Helix family, stood up. Your Honor, we will prove that Mr. Thorn Vane and Ms. Callahan intentionally rigged the monolith to injure a business rival. We have a witness who will testify to the unnatural nature of the defendants. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Katerina Volkov walked in. She wasn't in tactical gear. She was in a floral dress and a neck brace, looking like a victim of a terrible accident. Behind her followed the gray-suited woman Beatrice had seen, the unknown airdropper. I call to the stand, Sterling announced, the chief security auditor for the Obsidian Echo, Mara Thorne. Tessa's heart stopped. Thorne, the same middle name as Dominic. She looked at Dominic, whose face had gone deathly pale. Dominic? Tess whispered. Who is she? Dominic's voice was a low, pained rumble. My sister, the one who was supposed to be dead 20 years ago. Chapter 28. A Thorn in the Side. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Mara Thorne took the stand. She didn't look like a shifter. She looked like a corporate shark, cold, precise, and human. My name is Mara Thorne, she began, her voice a mirror of Dominic's resonant tone. I was the original heiress to the Greater Meridian legacy before my brother staged the accident that removed me. I have spent 2 decades watching as he wasted our potential. We are apex predators, Dominic. We should be the world's most elite military asset, not truck drivers. Dominic stood up, his presence shaking the very foundations of the building. Mara, that's enough. You were the one who tried to sell our DNA to the highest bidder. I protected the pack from you. Sit down, Mr. Thorn Vane, Justice Vance barked. Mara looked directly at Tess. And then there's the architect, the woman who built the cages. Miss Callahan, you claim to be an independent professional, but tell the court, when you designed the Ironwood Sanctuary, did you include the gas delivery system to keep the inmates sedated? Or was that just for the human intruders? Tess felt the sass rising like a tidal wave. She stood up, ignoring Sloane's frantic tugging on her sleeve. Your Honor, if I may, since the witness wants to discuss my designs, let's discuss them. Tess walked toward the evidence screen, pulling out her tablet. Ms. Thorne, you talk about cages, but let's talk about payroll. My brother Leo traced the digital signature on the falsified soil reports that framed my firm. It wasn't signed by me. It was signed by a former employee named Benny. Tess swiped the screen. A bank statement appeared. And here is a wire transfer of $500,000 to Benny's offshore account, dated the day before the reports were filed. The sender? The Obsidian Echo. You didn't just buy shackles, Mara. You bought my employee. The courtroom went silent. Mara's eyes narrowed, a flash of something predatory, and very much not human, flickering in her gaze. Those are for containment of volatile assets, Mara hissed. Assets? Tess stepped closer, her voice ringing with authority. You mean families? Like the one you tried to blow up in their own kitchen? You used Alistair as a puppet because you knew his ego was bigger than his brain. You wanted the rubber chickens to be the lead story so no one would look at what you were doing in the labs. Tess turned to the judge. Your Honor, this isn't a trial about structural negligence. It's a trial about a woman who is so jealous of her brother's crown that she's willing to burn down the entire city to wear the ashes. Chapter 29. The Evidence of the Heart. The trial shifted from a legal procedure to a battle of wills. Mara Thorne was a formidable opponent, using her knowledge of pack law and human ethics to twist every action Tess and Dominic had taken. But then, Arthur Callahan was called to the stand. Mr. Callahan, the prosecutor sneered, you claim to be an investigative journalist. Can you tell us what you found in those shipping containers from 1994? Arthur adjusted his tie, looking remarkably dignified. I found a legacy of care. I found that while my daughter was building skyscrapers, this man, Dominic, was making sure that children, regardless of their biology, had a safe place to play. I found that the monsters this court is afraid of are the ones who pay their taxes, look after their neighbors, and apparently have a very high standard for chew toys. Arthur looked at Dominic. I spent years looking for a conspiracy, and I found one. It's the conspiracy of a family that wants to live in peace. And if being a monster means saving my wife and my daughter from a group of billionaires who want to turn them into lab rats, then I'd say we need more monsters in this city. The gallery broke into applause. Justice Vance hammered her gavel, but she was looking at the evidence on her desk with a new light. Tess felt a wave of pride so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Her father, the man who had chased ghosts his whole life, had finally caught the only thing that mattered, the truth. But Mara wasn't done. As the court adjourned for recess, she intercepted Tess in the hallway. The air between them crackled with a dark, twisted version of the Alpha's presence. You think you've won, little architect? Mara whispered. You've won the jury, but you haven't won the pack. Do you think they'll follow a human who knows their secrets? Do you think they'll bow to a woman who uses their biology as a blueprint? Tess leaned in, her scent of mint and lightning clashing with Mara's scent of old paper and rot. They aren't bowing to my designs, Mara. They're bowing because I'm the only one who doesn't look at them like a project. I look at them like a home, and unlike you, I know how to protect my foundations. Chapter 30. The Alpha's Surrender. The day ended not with a verdict, but with a moment of raw, intoxicating vulnerability. Tess and Dominic were back at the monolith. The sun was setting, casting long, amber shadows across the office. Tess was sitting on the edge of the desk, her heels discarded, her head resting on Dominic's chest. Mara is still dangerous, Dominic said, his hands stroking her hair. She has the echo. She has the resources. And you have me, Tess said, pulling back to look at him. And you have Jack. And you have a family that actually likes you now, even if my dad still thinks you're a little suspicious. Dominic smiled, a soft, weary expression. He dropped to one knee, not as a king, but as a man. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the ring finger she had kept empty for 30 years. Tess, I didn't just want an architect. I didn't just want a mate. I wanted a partner who could tell me when I was wrong. I wanted someone who would stand in the fire with me and complain about the temperature. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring made of dark, unpolished ironwood, set with a diamond that looked like a drop of frozen lightning. I know you don't want your time wasted. I know you're a goal-getter. But I'm asking you to make one more project your priority. Build a life with me. Be the Luna this pack needs, and the woman I don't deserve. Tess looked at the ring, then at the man who had been henpecked, berated, and loved by her in equal measure. She let out a short, dry laugh, a single tear escaping. If I say yes, the first thing we're doing is redesigning the master suite. That fireplace has to go. It's a security risk. Dominic chuckled, his forehead leaning against hers. As the Luna commands. And I'm keeping my firm, and the Porsche. Naturally. Then, yes, you big, brooding wolf. Yes. As they kissed, a final airdrop notification appeared on the screen of the monolith. From Leo. Message. I found Mara's server. The passwords were all Dominic sucks. She's literally so dramatic. Also, the pizza is here. The war was far from over, but as Tess Callahan looked at her new family, the wolves, the hackers, the lawyers, and the journalists, she knew the structural integrity of her life had never been stronger. Chapter 31. The Luna's Audit. The engagement ring on Tess's finger felt like a localized power source. She sat in the monolith's tactical suite, ignoring the triple-shot espresso that had gone cold, and stared at the data Leo had pulled from Mara's personal server. Password, Dominic sucks. Honestly, the lack of creativity is the most offensive part of her villainy, Tess muttered, rubbing her temples. Don't underestimate her, Tess, Dominic said, leaning over her shoulder. He looked tired, the courtroom battle having drained him more than any physical fight. Mara doesn't play by pack rules. She plays by the rules of venture capitalism. She doesn't want to kill us. She wants to acquire us. Well, I'm an architect, Dominic. I know how to block a hostile takeover. Tess pointed to a highlighted section of the code. Look at this. She's targeting the Greater Meridian Trust. It's the fund that pays for the pack's healthcare, education, and, ironically, the puppy toys. If she freezes these assets, the pack starves into submission in 48 hours. I'll call the trustees, Dominic started, but Tess held up a hand. No, the trustees are likely her old friends. We need to move the assets, all of them, into an offshore account managed by someone she can't touch. And who would that be? My mother, Tess said with a wicked grin. Beatrice Callahan is the only woman I know who can launder a fortune through a network of charity flower auctions without the IRS even blinking. Plus, Mara will never look for the pack's millions in a floral shop's ledger. The doors to the suite hissed open. Arthur Callahan walked in, looking like he'd slept in a library. I've been checking the Echo's property holdings. Mara isn't just buying prisons. She's buying the land surrounding Project Ironwood. She's planning to surround the sanctuary with high-frequency emitters. She's going to build a cage around your fortress. Tess felt her competitive fire roar. She wants to cage my design? Over my dead body. She's also calling for a purity audit within the pack, Naomi added, entering with a grim expression. She's whispering to the older members that a human Luna is a structural weakness. She's challenging your competency, Tess, not as an architect, but as a leader. Tess stood up, smoothing her skirt. Her sass was cold and sharp now. Fine. If the pack wants approving, I'll give them one, but we're doing it my way. We aren't going to a forest to howl at the moon. We're going to the boardroom. Tess, what are you planning? Dominic asked, both worried and immensely turned on by the look in her eyes. A merger, Tess said. And by the time I'm done, Mara Thorne is going to wish she'd stayed dead. Chapter 32. The Proving of the Callahans. The following evening, the Monolith's grand hall was filled with the elders of the Greater Meridian Pack. They were a somber group, dressed in expensive suits, but radiating a primal, ancient power. They had watched the trial, they had seen the rubber chickens, and they were skeptical. Tessa Callahan, the eldest, a man named Silas who looked like he'd been carved from a mountain, spoke. You saved the Alpha. You designed the sanctuary. But the Obsidian Echo says you are a liability, that your family is a leash Mara can pull to make our king dance. Tess stepped forward, flanked by her family. Arthur looked determined. Beatrice was subtly critiquing the hall's orchid arrangements, and Leo was tapping away at a customized tablet. You want to talk about leashes? Tess's voice was clear and unafraid. My family isn't a leash. They're a reinforcement. You think being human makes us weak? Humans built the cities you hide in. We built the satellites that track your enemies. And right now, my family is the only thing standing between your bank accounts and Mara's pocket. Bold words, Silas rumbled. But Mara has launched a digital siege on our infrastructure. Our logistics network is failing. The trucks are stopped at the borders. Prove your competency, human. Fix the flow. Tess looked at Leo. Leo, show them the Callahan protocol. Leo grinned, his fingers flying. The Echo is using a localized GPS spoofing algorithm to confuse the pack's trucks. They think the roads are closed, but they're just being rerouted into Echo-owned warehouses. So, what's the fix? Dominic asked. We don't use GPS, Arthur spoke up, stepping forward with a map. I've spent 40 years tracking stories through backroads and unmarked trails. I've mapped the entire logistics route through the old journalist trails. No satellites, no digital footprint, just old-fashioned navigation. And the cargo? Beatrice asked. I've rebranded every truck as Callahan Floral. Nobody stops a truck full of wedding lilies, especially not with the forged permits Sloan just finished printing. The pack elders watched in stunned silence as the monitors showed the Greater Meridian Logistics Network turning from red to green. The weakness of the humans, their analog knowledge, their legal loopholes, and their sheer audacity was bypassing the most sophisticated digital siege in the world. Competency isn't just about strength, Tess said, looking Silas in the eye. It's about knowing how to solve the problem before it hits the foundation. My family has been doing that for years. Now, are you going to keep whining about purity, or are we going to finish this? Silas looked at the monitors, then at the fierce woman standing before him. He lowered his head. The Callahans have proven their grit. The Luna has our respect. Dominic pulled Tess close, whispering, I think my heart just grew 3 sizes. Also, your mom is currently trying to sell Silas a subscription to Peony of the Month. Chapter 33. The Siege of Ironwood. The victory was short-lived. Just as the elders recognized Tess, the alarm systems for Project Ironwood went into a full-scale meltdown. She's not waiting for the legal battle anymore, Gideon shouted, rushing into the hall. Mara has deployed a sonic kinetic team to the sanctuary site. They're using the vibration emitters your father found. They're literally shaking the foundations of the sanctuary apart. Tess's face went pale. The concrete hasn't reached full cure strength yet. If they hit the resonant frequency of the primary supports, the whole thing collapses. We're moving, Dominic commanded. Gideon, get the strike team. Tess, stay here where it's safe. Safe? Tess laughed, already grabbing her tactical laptop and her architectural laser level. Dominic, I'm the only one who knows the frequency of those supports. If you go in there and just start hitting things, you'll trigger a structural collapse yourself. You're the alpha, but I'm the architect. You don't go into my site without me. And Jack? Jack is staying with Leo, Tess said, glancing at her brother. He's the last line of defense for the servers. Jack, if anyone but a Callahan touches that mainframe, rip it. Jack the Ripper let out a low, terrifying growl and sat firmly by the server door. They raced to the site in the Emerald Porsche and the armored SUV. As they crested the hill overlooking the valley, the scene was chaotic. 6 massive industrial trucks were parked in a circle around the half-finished sanctuary, each carrying a tower that emitted a low, bone-shaking hum. The air looked like it was shimmering with heat. Tess looked at her laptop. They're at 40 hertz. The primary pillars will shatter in 20 minutes. Dominic, You have to take out the trucks, but you can't use explosives. The shockwave will do the job for them." "Then we do it the old-fashioned way," Dominic said, his eyes glowing gold. "With teeth." "Wait!" Tess grabbed his arm. "Take this." She handed him a bulky, modified sensor unit from her bag. "It's one of my seismic dampeners. I reversed the polarity. Stick it to the base of the tower. It'll create a feedback loop and buy you 10 minutes of silence while you handle the mercenaries." Dominic kissed her hard, a taste of adrenaline and promise, and shifted mid-air as he jumped from the moving car. Chapter 34. The Architect's Duel. While Dominic and the Pack strike team tore through the Obsidian Echo mercenaries like a hot knife through butter, Tess stayed in the Porsche, her fingers flying across the keys. She wasn't just watching the fight, she was hunting for the source of the control signal. "Come on, Mara. You're too much of a control freak to let a computer do the work," Tess whispered. She found it. A localized Wi-Fi signal originating from an old ranger tower a mile away. Tess didn't wait for Dominic. She slammed the Porsche into gear, the tires screaming as she raced toward the tower. She arrived just as a helicopter was starting to spin up its rotors. Mara Thorne stood on the landing pad, holding a remote detonator. She looked at the green Porsche and laughed. "You really are a persistent little insect, aren't you? You stopped the vibration trucks, but you forgot the golden rule of demolition. Always have a backup. If I can't shake the sanctuary apart, I'll blow the supports manually." Tess stepped out of the car, her architectural ruler held like a baton. "You aren't a thorn, Mara. You're just a spoiled brat who doesn't know how to build anything. You're destroying the only place your people can be safe just to spite your brother." "My people?" Mara spat. "They're assets, and you've tainted them with your humanity." Mara hit the button. Nothing happened. "What?" Mara frantically mashed the detonator. "The charges should have leveled the north wing." "I didn't touch your remote, Mara. I hacked the control towers," Tess said, stepping closer, her voice dripping with sass. "They're networked for remote access. I reversed the polarity of the signal receiver. And that button you just pressed? It didn't trigger a detonation sequence. It triggered a breach of contract clause I embedded in your mercenary payroll system. Every time you try to fire, it auto-refunds your strike team. You just bankrupted yourself in real time." You bitch!" Mara lunged at Tess, her eyes glowing a sickly, fractured amber. She wasn't a full alpha, but she was fast. Tess didn't panic. She used her knowledge of the tower's rickety structure. She stepped to the left, kicking a rusted support beam she'd identified the second she pulled up. The landing pad tilted sharply. Mara lost her balance, the remote flying from her hand and shattering against the hood of the pristine emerald Porsche Dominic had just bought her. Tess winced. "That's going to cost you extra." "Nice angle," Tess whispered, standing over her. "Though I think I prefer the view from over here." Chapter 35. The Intoxicating Surrender. The Echo was finished. With Mara captured and her funds redirected to the Pack's survival, the shadow over Project Ironwood finally lifted. The Pack spent the next week rebuilding the minor damage, but the real celebration happened back at the monolith. Tess was in the master suite, finally having that security audit of the fireplace she'd promised. Dominic walked in, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He looked at her, messy hair, soot on her nose, and that brilliant, sharp mind still calculating the load-bearing capacity of their future. "The elders want to know when the wedding is," Dominic said, setting the wine down. "And Silas wants to know if your mom can get him some lilies for his den." Tess turned, her eyes soft as she looked at him. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, intoxicating heat that had nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with the man. "The wedding can wait until the concrete cures," Tess whispered, pulling him toward her by his silk tie. "But the surrendering? That starts now." The romance that followed was intoxicating, a passionate, soul-deep connection that celebrated their victory and their bond. Tess finally let go of the last of her walls, surrendering herself to the love of her alpha, realizing that being henpecked by her was Dominic's favorite part of the day. As they lay in the quiet of the night, Tess felt a sense of completion. She was still a goal-getter, she was still successful, but she wasn't lonely anymore. She had a pack, a family that was weirder than she'd ever imagined, and a man who looked at her like she was the blueprint for the universe. Dominic? Yes, Luna. If we have kids, and they're puppies, I'm going to need a much bigger Porsche. Dominic laughed, kissing her shoulder. As the Luna commands. But in the darkness of the server room, Jack the Ripper's ears twitched. A final, hidden file on Mara's computer began a countdown. The war wasn't over. The ultimate secret was about to be revealed. Chapter 36. The Tactical Nuptials. The wedding of the century was not held in a cathedral or a ballroom. It was held in the central atrium of Project Ironwood, the newly completed sanctuary that Tess Callahan had designed to be earthquake-proof, bomb-proof, and most importantly, paparazzi-proof. The atmosphere was a unique blend of Vogue and Call of Duty. Mom, for the last time, you cannot put industrial magnesium flares in the centerpieces just in case the obsidian echo returns. They're a fire hazard, not a tactical decision, Tess said, standing still while 3 seamstresses adjusted the hem of her gown. The dress was an architectural marvel, a structured column of white silk with a corset reinforced like a suspension bridge. It's not explosives, Tess. It's confetti cannons loaded with silver glitter. It's a deterrent and a celebration, Beatrice Callahan shouted, directing a team of shifters who were carrying massive arches of white wisteria. And tell Arthur to stop frisking the caterers. He's confiscating their ladles. Tess sighed, looking at her reflection. She didn't look like a blushing bride. She looked like a queen preparing for a coronation. And in a way, she was. She was the Luna. You look structural, Sloane commented, walking in wearing a maid of honor dress that doubled as a tactical jumpsuit. In a good way, like you could support the weight of the world. I'm just trying to support the weight of this train, Tess muttered. Where's Leo? The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, and he's supposed to be monitoring the perimeter. Leo is in the server room with Jack, Sloane said, her voice dropping. That file on Mara's computer, the final countdown, it's down to the last 10 minutes. Leo thinks he can isolate it before it executes, but he doesn't want to worry you. Tess felt a spike of adrenaline. Worry me? I'm marrying a werewolf king in a fortress I built. Worry is my baseline. Get me my headset. Moments later, Tess was walking down the aisle. The atrium was breathtaking, the glass ceiling filtering the sunlight into a golden haze. The pack elders stood on one side, looking solemn and powerful. The Callahan family and friends stood on the other, looking chaotic and armed with cameras. At the altar stood Dominic. He wore a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders with sinful perfection. His hair was tamed, his amber eyes were glowing softly, and when he saw her, the Alpha's presence rolled over the room like a warm wave of pure adoration. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at her as if she were the only structure in the world that mattered. As Tess reached him, Arthur handed her off with a stern whisper to Dominic. I've checked the structural integrity of this altar. It's solid. Don't break it. Dominic smiled, taking Tess's hand. I promise to only break the bed, Arthur. Tess slapped his arm lightly, though she was smiling. Behave. We have vows to exchange. The ceremony was short, powerful, and devoid of fluff. Dominic vowed to protect her with his life and serve her with his heart. Tess vowed to reinforce his foundations and never let him crumble. I now pronounce you Alpha and Luna, the officiant, Silas, the elder, boomed. Dominic kissed her, and the pack erupted in howls. The humans erupted in applause. It was perfect. And then, Leo's voice crackled in Tess's hidden earpiece. Tess, don't freak out, but the countdown just hit 0. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a location beacon. You need to look at the main screen. Chapter 37. The Architect's Legacy. Tess pulled back from the kiss, her eyes darting to the massive digital wall she had installed for the reception visuals. The romantic slideshow of their courtship vanished. The screen flickered black, and then a file opened. It was a video log from Mara Thorne, dated 3 weeks prior. The crowd gasped. Gideon moved to cover Dominic, but Tess held up a hand. Wait, look! On the screen, Mara looked disheveled and frantic. She was holding a stack of papers and a dog DNA test kit? If you're seeing this, Video Mara hissed, it means I've failed. But I won't let you have everything, Dominic. I've spent months analyzing the anomaly, the one variable I couldn't account for, the beast that sat at your feet in the office, the creature that chewed through the Kevlar of my best lieutenant. She held up a picture of Jack the Ripper. I ran the genome. I watched him at the construction site. I thought he was a shifter in disguise. I thought he was an ancient guardian. But he's not. He's just a dog. A regular, chaotic, destructive pit bull with zero magical properties. I spent $2 million trying to clone him because I thought he was the key to your power. And all I got was a dog that ate my lab equipment. Mara threw the papers at the camera. I hate you all! I hate the architect, and I hate that stupid dog. Take the clones! I don't want them! They're in the basement of the Vertex Tower. Goodbye! The screen went black. The atrium was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then, Tess burst out laughing. It started as a giggle and turned into a full-body shake. Dominic joined in, his deep laughter booming off the walls. The entire pack followed. The final secret wasn't a doomsday device. It was the revelation that the terrifying villain had bankrupted herself trying to clone Jack the Ripper because she couldn't believe a normal dog could be so destructive. Leo! Tess gasped, wiping tears from her eyes. Send a team to the Vertex Tower. If there are clones of Jack, we're going to need a bigger yard. 1 year later, the morning sun filtered through the reinforced glass of the monolith's penthouse. Tess sat at the kitchen island, reviewing the blueprints for Ironwood Phase 2. Coffee, Luna? Dominic asked, placing a mug in front of her. He was wearing sweatpants and holding a baby bottle. In his other arm was Julian, their 3-month-old son, who had his father's eyes and his mother's loud opinion on everything. Thanks, Tess murmured, leaning into Dominic's side. Did you feed the army? The army has been fed. Tess looked toward the massive living room. The designer sofa, her 4th one this year, was currently occupied. Jack the Ripper was asleep in the center. Curled up next to him was a slightly smaller female pit bull named Jill. She was one of Mara's failed clones, though she wasn't a failure at all. She was just as destructive as Jack, but with a refined taste for shredding silk curtains instead of leather. And on top of Jack's head slept a tiny gray kitten named Spike. Arthur called, Dominic said, kissing the top of Tess's head. He says the security footage of Jack and Jill teaming up to open the refrigerator is the best evidence of pack tactics he's ever seen. My dad needs a hobby, Tess smiled, other than being the unofficial lawyer for a werewolf pack. He's happy, Dominic said. We all are. Tess looked around her life. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was full of shedding fur, broken toys, and a husband who could crush a tank but panicked if the baby sneezed. She had built skyscrapers that scraped the heavens. She had designed vaults that could withstand nukes. But this messy, beautiful, indestructible family was the greatest structure she had ever engineered. Her phone pinged with an airdrop. From The Apex, message, nice angle. Tess looked up. Dominic was standing across the room, snapping a photo of her holding their son, messy hair and all. She grinned, hitting accept. Sent, The Architect. Message, nice view. The end.